Meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Start with roll call. Calvert.
Here.
Hofstra.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Case. Ludke.
Here.
Orlowski.
Here.
Romano.
Here.
Schlinsky.
Here.
And to present. With that, we have a quorum. First order of business will be approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting dated 12/9/2021 and the special meeting dated 12/14/2021?
I'll make that motion.
The motion from Commissioner Schlinsky. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any questions, comments on the motion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of approval?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. So before we get started, if anybody thinks they're going to speak on an agenda item this evening, now would be the time to stand. The court reporter will swear you all in at once. And then you can give your name and address one at a time as you come up to the podium when it's your turn to speak. All right, thank you. Okay, so the order of business for each agenda item will go as follows. We'll start with staff input, move to presentation of the petitioner, if the petitioner wishes to add anything to what staff has already said. Then we'll go to public participation and questions. That would be the public. And then questions from the commission. Closing comments of the petitioner, if the petitioner has any. And then we'll close the public hearing, move to discussion amongst ourselves, and make a motion to make a motion at that time if necessary. All right, so the first item of business will be petition PZ 210011 for 1334 South Villa Avenue, special use electronic message display, New Life Bible Church. Whenever you're ready, Consuelo.
Thank you, Chairman Jarrett. The first item for you to consider tonight is PZ 210011, and that's a special use request for an electronic message display center sign at 1334 South Villa Avenue, presently occupied by New Life Bible Church. This property is surrounded by single-family residential homes and is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation for single-family residential. The request before you tonight is specifically regarding a new sign that's being proposed. Because it is an electronic message display panel in a residential district, it does require a special use, but the code does allow for a special use because it is an institutional use. So that's before you tonight for consideration. This is an aerial image of the property as it sits today. The property itself, the church sits on two parcels of property. The parcel highlighted in black here, outlined in black, is the southern parcel, which is where the sign is being proposed at that southeast corner of the property. Some quick background regarding the property. This property is, like I said, zoned residential, and it does allow for an electronic message display sign because it is an institutional use and it's not a residential use in the property. So our code allows, granted a special use is approved, the petitioner, the property owner, can install the electronic message display sign. Some background, back on December the 21st of 2020, the village board approved a similar request allowing an electronic message display panel for a similar type of use in non-single family residential home. In this case, it was a church on a different location on Cornell, and the board did approve a special use, a variation as for the electronic message display sign on that property. The subject sign that's being proposed as part of the subject property is a modification of the existing sign. The picture on the left-hand side of this slide does indicate what the sign looks like today. It does include a brick base, and a changeable copyboard sign as the primary sign above the brick base. The proposed improvements would keep the brick base, but also install a new 2-panel sign above the brick base. I say 2 panels because part of that permanent sign would be a static sign, and then the other southern portion would be in the electronic message display panel. The proposed plans indicate the sign will measure about 5 feet in height and will be surrounded by landscaping to meet our code requirements. It is important to note that the plan of survey the petitioner submitted does indicate the sign will meet the required setbacks along the existing property lines. However, we do want to note that there is an existing sign along the south property line that is existing non-conforming that will have to be modified to comply with code. That sign in question not only sits on private property, but also projects into the public right-of-way. We don't have record of a permit for that sign, and it does encroach into the public property, and that will have to be brought up to code compliance. Regardless if the special use is approved or not, the owner will have to address that non-conforming situation. Our code does have regulations for electronic message displays as it relates to brightness, hours of operation, landscaping, message hold time, maximum area, animation, and graphics. The petitioner has indicated they're going to comply with all of those code regulations. They're not seeking variation approval for any of those. And with that, staff has reviewed the request and does find that it would be consistent with the recent approvals for electronic message displays for institutional uses. This request, like I mentioned earlier, would be similar to that of the special use that was approved last year for another church. Staff does not object to this request and is supportive. If the commission finds in support of the special use request, the following motion could be entertained: to recommend approval of the following: a special use to install an electronic message display panel in the RS10 residential single-family district on a lot occupied by an institutional use for the property located at 1334 South Villa, PIN number 0615303034.
All right, thank you. Just real quick before we move to the petitioner, I do want to point out one thing I think is an error in the memo, since it's as part of the record. The third paragraph on page 2, the last line says, however, this provision does not apply to the subject property because it is located within the Ardmore Avenue Business District. That sentence should be struck. Looks like probably a copy and paste thing from...
Noted, and we'll make sure that it's corrected in the staff report.
Thank you. All right, at this time, if the petitioner has anything they'd like to say, state your name and address for the record, and feel free to continue after that.
Okay, my name is Karen Dodge, address 101 East Illinois in Aurora, and we also have a representative here from the church if you have any more questions. I'm representing J&S Electric and Sign on behalf of New Life Bible Church. Okay, New Life Bible Chapel. We are requesting approval for a special use to allow an electronic message center for an institutional use. There is an existing ground sign, and we would like to replace the cabinet with a static panel and electronic message center. We will comply with all the items in section 8.7 for electronic message display panels. The sign will allow for communication of church activities to the community. There is a wooden sign for the food pantry that needs to be relocated onto private property. We have provided a letter from the church to the city stating we will relocate the sign once the ground thaws. And I appreciate your time if you have any more questions.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Right. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this agenda item? Well, we'll get back to it, but we have any questions.
Cheryl Tucker, 434 South Cornell. I do not have a problem with this. In fact, I was a trustee when we did the one on Ardmore. I have the same concern that I had for the one on Ardmore, and that is the distance from them driving on, can you hear me? The distance of the driving of people on the street to the changing of the message on the message board. My concern is if there's not enough distance between them driving on the street, even though there's not as much traffic on Ardmore as there would be on Villa, that it will cause a traffic incident on them looking at it. Do we have the lighting perfect and the message board? I was trying to read through it to flip the sign in enough time period that it will not cause difficulty for drivers to see their sign, but not cause a failure on that difficulty. That is my concern on the sign. The sign's probably perfect. You guys already will go through the checklist, but I am kind of concerned where it's located with the distance of people driving by the sign and causing some type of difficulty.
Okay, yeah, so
doing it.
just a point of clarification, that our sign ordinance does have very strict standards on brightness, on the types of motion that are permitted in signs, essentially no motion other than changing from one image to the other, and that has to be a static change, not a swipe, not a blend, not a whooshing off to the left or right. And there is a minimum amount of time that has to pass between changes, so you can't have a change every second or 2 seconds. I can't speak to exactly what that number is off the top of my head. I believe it's 3 seconds, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, because I know Willowbrook sign had to be adjusted because it was it was a hazard, but that's a different area of where it's at than where this is. I know there's not as much traffic, but that was my concern to cause the distance on switching.
Okay. I appreciate your concerns. Thank you. Anyone else?
I feel like I have to speak because I'm here and I got sworn in, so the stenographer needs to cite my name. My name is Matt Weiss. I live at 1345 South Villa, so it's across the street from the church. I'm good with this. And I want to thank this body for sending me a notice so that I knew about this meeting so I could come and see what it was about, because I don't want a light blaring in my window at night. That'd be bad. So thanks again.
So,
Really appreciate it.
are you across Reardon or are you across Villa?
I'm across Villa.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I look at the church
Okay,
every day.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
All right, anyone else wishing to speak on this item? All right, questions from the commission?
I have no questions.
None.
Okay. All right, if there are no questions, we will close the public hearing and move to discussion by commission members. So, actually, I kind of do have a question. Is this sign capable of, are you familiar with the one at the library? That's, so it's a black background that could produce lights, but it's not an LED. So like they can't do a white background. They can do colored letters. Is this like an LED where you can have a solid white background, for instance? Okay, but I guess my comment, it's sort of a comment, would be to the petitioner. The bright white background and bright white text can be very obnoxious, and those are the things that tend to get you over the light limits. So be careful with those things if this is ultimately approved, so that the village doesn't have to come down and make you adjust your sign. All right, comments? Any other comments?
Only other thing I'll say is I live within 3 blocks of this. I walk by this church all the time. They've really been, the last year, doing a lot to upgrade their grounds. They've been painting things that looks a whole lot better than it did about a year ago. And I strongly support what they're trying to do.
Okay. Any other comments?
I just have one. So just to clarify, the electronic portion of this sign that's going to change is going to be where "Welcome to our church" is at? Or
Yes,
that
that's
portion
correct.
of it. So you're just going to have a message in there that changes every few seconds. And what color will that message be?
Whatever they choose.
Yep. Excuse me, we've got a court reporter,
Yeah,
so we're gonna need your name and address and to speak up and not speak over each other so she can get everything.
Just go up to the mic.
Yeah, that's fine. If you can answer the question, feel free.
My name is Elias Thomas. Address is 508 West Illinois Avenue, Palatine, Illinois, 60067. I'm a trustee of the New Life Bible Chapel. And our intention as far as the bottom part is not to have messages going all the time. It's simply to have something where we can say Happy Father's Day, Happy Mother's Day, or some speaker is coming if somebody wants to come attend the church. That's pretty much the intention of it. There's no turning messages when you are driving there. You won't see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If there are none, then I would entertain a motion from whoever would like to make it.
I'll make the motion. Recommend approval of the following. 1, special use to install electronic message display panel in the RS10 residential single dwelling district on a lot occupied by an institutional use. This is for the property located at 1334 South Villa Avenue, PIN 06-15-303-034. With a finding the fact that such variance meets the standards enumerated in Article 11.5 of Appendix C of the Municipal Code, Village of Villa Park, Basic Zoning Ordinances.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner Orlowski. Any questions or comments on the motion? All right, roll call. Calvert,
Yes.
Hofstra,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lutke,
Yes.
Orlowski,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
And I too vote yes. With that, our recommendation will pass the village board. They can accept, reject, or modify as they see fit. Thank you and good luck. All right. All right, the next item of business will be PZ 210012 15 West North Avenue, special use cannabis dispensary, GRD Illinois LLC. It's my understanding that this application has been withdrawn, is that correct?
That's correct. We received notification from the applicant of withdrawal of their application.
Just to double check, there's no one from the applicant or representing the applicant wishing to speak? All right. Do we have a reason for the withdrawal?
The petitioner was trying to purchase a property, and that fell through.
Okay.
That deal that proposal to purchase it. So that's the reason why he wasn't pursuing the special use anymore, because he wasn't able to acquire the property.
Okay.
It is important to note, however, that the applicant is the same applicant that received special use approval for a cannabis business over at 305 West North last year. He intends to follow up with that location.
All right, thank you. All right, so then the next item would be amendments to certain provisions of Appendix C Basic Zoning Ordinance, Article 6, Section 6.11.2.e, 6.11.2.g.7, 6.11.2.g.12, 6.12.a, 6.12.b, and 14.2.22.f. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. This request has to do with zoning text amendments to several sections of the village zoning ordinance, which is known as Appendix C of the Village Code. So I want to start off with some background information regarding this request. Back in 2020, the Community Development Department did receive a anonymous complaint regarding properties with shipping containers on their properties, illegal placement of these containers. We did not have record of a permit. We did not have record of any correspondence regarding these containers. So we did follow up and issued violation notices to about 30 properties in town throughout the village regarding these structures. In October of 2021, one of our trustees, Trustee Kozar, along with several other members, indicated they wanted to pursue several zoning text amendments, and those are before you here tonight for recommendation. And I'll go ahead and read those to you. Okay, the request was to strike 6.11.2.e. In our C districts, the display of a period of not to exceed 90 days of seasonal items, such as gardening and patio equipment and supplies. And number 2, a proposal to strike 6.11.2 G7, which indicates no entertainment, whether live, recorded, or otherwise, is permitted in the outdoor seating area. The third item was to strike 6.11.2 G12. An occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area. The occupancy permit is valid from March 1st through November 30th and must be renewed annually. All outdoor furniture must be removed within 24 hours of a permit expiration. Item 4 was to strike 6.12A2. There would be indicating there may be no more than one temporary outdoor storage container per property. Moving along, item 5 was to strike 6.12A.5, indicating no temporary outdoor storage containers may remain on the property for more than 60 consecutive days per year, and a proposal to replace that with no temporary outdoor storage container may remain on the subject property for more than 90 consecutive days per year. Moving along, item 6 was to strike 6.12A6, indicating temporary storage containers may not exceed 8 feet in height or cover an area of more than 130 square feet. To replace that with temporary outdoor storage containers may not exceed 10 feet in height or cover an area more than 200 square feet. Item 7 was to strike 6.12A7, indicating temporary outdoor storage containers must be placed only on a driveway or other hard surface. 8 was a proposal to strike 6.128A13, indicating temporary outdoor storage containers may not be used for the purpose of conducting business or selling merchandise. Moving along, the next item recommended to be modified was item 8, like I mentioned, 6.128.13, but replacing that with temporary outdoor storage containers may not be granted occupancy for purposes of habitation or conducting business. Item 9 was to strike 6.12B4, a requirement placing these structures on a paved surface. Item 10 was to strike 6.12B7, a requirement to screen from public view with a privacy screen, example given fence, landscaping, or similar methods, and replace that with screen from public view with a privacy screen, example given fence, landscaping, or similar methods, or painted. Item 11 was a proposal to strike 6.12B13, may not be used for the purpose of conducting business or selling merchandise, and replace that with may not be granted occupancy for purposes of habitation or conducting business. And finally, item 12 was to strike 14.2.22F, which was the definition of a shipping container, which was shipping container is a standard reusable vessel designed without an axle or wheels, which was replaced with shipping container. A type of outdoor storage container is a standard reusable vessel designed without an axle or wheels, which was so forth. On October 11th of 2021, the village board did approve text amendments to permit storage containers subject to the requirements that were listed in the staff report. The code was modified to provide one section, section 6.12, pertaining to outdoor storage containers in non-residential property, into two sections. Section A was speaking to temporary outdoor storage containers, and section B speaking in regards to permanent outdoor storage containers in non-residential property. So that was approved. As a background, the definition of Article 14 was also modified to state that a shipping container is defined as a standard reusable vessel designed without an axle or wheels, which was originally specifically or formally designed for or used in the parking, cargo movement, or transportation of freight, articles, goods, or commodities, and or 2, designed for or capable of being mounted or moved on a rail car, truck, trailer, or loaded on a ship. A special meeting did take place before the Planning and Zoning Commission on December 14th of 2021. 6 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, including Chairman Jarrett, were in attendance and primarily discussed the outdoor storage container regulations, as per the email that we received with those recommendations from the board. Discussion did include consensus of limiting the number of storage containers to 1, variation process for more than 1 container, a mix of thoughts regarding 60 or 90 consecutive days for temporary storage containers, allowing temporary outdoor storage containers to match industry standards. Moving along, discussion also included measuring, limiting the height to 8.5 feet tall by 8 feet wide by 20 feet in length and 160 square feet in area, keeping the requirement to place containers on a driveway or other hard surface, and keeping existing language regarding the use. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not feel the definition of a shipping container needed to be amended to reference occupancy for purposes of habitation or conducting business. Regarding the permanent outdoor storage containers, consensus was to keep the requirement for placing on a paved surface, which would be consistent with the language for temporary outdoor storage containers. It would be difficult to determine when existing structures were installed because there is no record of a permit, and or to determine if they're on a paved surface without going onto private property to inspect. Chairman Jarrett, you did clarify that the definition of you did clarify on item 6.12.b.7 and clarify that or similar methods was intended to allow staff the flexibility to permit something like painted, cladding, or similar materials such as the trellis. Something other than a fence. At that meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission did not feel the need to add or paint it to the screening requirement, or see the need to reference habitation or conducting business. Therefore, consensus at the meeting was for the existing regulations to remain. Finally, there was consensus to keep the definition as is per the online village code, which does not reference a type of outdoor storage container in the definition. Regarding the size, however, there was consensus indicating to keep the language, but also to modify regarding the specifics on the height or the size of the container, and not to allow stacking of such containers. The minutes from the December 14 meeting were included in your packet. Staff did follow up regarding the other items that were brought up, specifically regarding outdoor displays, outdoor entertainment, and outdoor seating areas, and found that outdoor seating areas and displays as permitted as seasonal as long as they are located on private property. And those regulations can be found in section 6.11.2. I won't read all the specifics as in the code, but I do want to specify that it does reference that a time limit of 90 days for seasonal items, that outdoor seating areas to eating and drinking establishments are subject to supplemental regulations, such as keeping the areas open to the sky, with some exceptions, the seating area being located on private property or public right-of-way areas, provided that at least 4 feet to public sidewalk is provided. Must be in a seating area located in a yard or required building setbacks, and so forth. There's about, 13 items where it speaks to seating area regulations. We did follow with conducting research on adjacent properties as it relates to outdoor entertainment. And we found that unless it's specified and approved at a special event, in general, it's not allowed in other communities. Lombard was a adjacent community that does require all live entertainment activities to be conducted within the confines of a building and requires a live entertainment application to be submitted to the village for review and approval. Regarding the temporary storage containers, staff found that there was no standard in terms of the length of time that they were allowed. We do not object to revising to allow for 90 consecutive days versus the 60 days. Moving along, we found that permits are required when they are allowed. Specifically in Addison, they generally do not permit for commercial properties unless it's a manufacturing zoning district. Lombard does allow cargo containers for sites that are under construction in commercial and industrial properties, as long as they're located either on a concrete paved surface or a loading area. They must be in a buildable area and placed outside of the required yards. Moving along, Amherst does allow shipping containers for storage only with an open permit. Recent text amendments do allow for outdoor service stations for some bars and restaurants to serve drinks out of them and use as an accessory structures with restrictions. So that recently was approved in Amherst. Glenview allows on commercial properties if they meet setbacks and screen from view. It does restrict the area and the size in residential districts that are only allowed on a driveway up to 5 days on a temporary basis. Other communities such as Deerfield, Carroll Stream, Highland Park permit storage containers on a temporary basis as part of an open construction permit. Otherwise, they are not permitted. Based on the feedback received from the Planning and Zoning Commission and the research above, staff is in support of amending 6.12.8.5 to allow temporary outdoor storage containers to remain on the subject property for no more than 90 consecutive days versus 60. And is in support of amending 6.12.8.6 to allow temporary outdoor storage containers up to 8.5 feet in height, up to 8 feet wide, and up to 20 feet in length, or cover an area of no more than 160 square feet in area. Should the commission find in support of the requested action, the motion for the items as requested could be made, and I can answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this agenda item?
Hello, Cheryl Tucker, 434 South Cornell. I couldn't follow through with a lot of that, so you may have already corrected a lot of what I have issues on. At this point, striking 6.11 to G12. Right now, that's a moot point. With COVID, there's already been a release of it with not requiring permits due to COVID. But I do not believe that removing that would be a good idea in the future for the simple fact that that ordinance is treated in the same property of a temporary addition onto a building. We require permits for somebody that temporarily wants to have an outdoor shed or, shed's not a good idea, but an outdoor facility for a short period of time for occasions that they have on there. And by removing that, you will restrict the commission by doing a check and balance type idea of those additional things and monitoring to make sure that the businesses in the town have basically insurance and fire guidelines that are going on. I don't know if there's for them to put that permit in, is there a price that they have to do, or is it just a paperwork?
Permits do require review and do involve fees with
So
permits.
that for them to file that permit annually, there would be a cost to it.
Typically, yes, for building permits, there's a
Okay.
cost for the review.
Because that would be considered a building permit, is that what it falls under?
Correct. Whenever we do have to enforce code regulations, it's very typical that we require permits and there's some planned review fees that are part of that.
Okay. Well, as a resident, I would suggest that didn't have a pricing maybe, but that it would be a permit so that the village could basically, be aware that the following restaurants do have outdoor seating going on from March to November, just as a safety issue, if that's the issue of them not wanting annual thing because of the cost on it. Occupancy permit just to let, that they're having a temporary extension to their building, I would think would be something that you could control, and that way you would be notified of it without making a, pricing, I can't think of the word of it, on a business. I mean, excessive thing of money on the part of a business. I believe you already said on 612A, on the fact that no more than one temporary thing on being stripped. I would be a little concerned if you open that up. That means any business could put 3 or 4 storage containers. It also goes with the fact of you removing, if you remove that it has to be placed on paved surfaces or a driveway or hard surface. Our rainy season in Villa Park, if you allow them to put it anywhere else in a field or restrict that, I can see a lot of those storage containers that would be halfway up their container in mud or in water if they're not required to be on a permanent surface, or stuck in the middle of a field somewhere. On some of these businesses in the back of their thing, they'll set 3 or 4 containers in the back of their field, and if you allow it as stated in 612B4, you remove it, that would give them a permanent thing to stick it in the middle of their field and leave it there. All they'd have to do is put a screening or something else around it for your revenue, and here we've got beautiful 3 or 4 storage containers in the middle of somebody's field, and if it's in an area where residents walk by, it looks real appealing. So if you take that into consideration, if you're coming down on those components, that is all I have really concerned about, is that, and I also noticed that temporary storage containers must be on the driveway, or is the same, you're removing it temporarily, you're also moving it as a permanent one. So it's a duplicate thing if you allow it for both.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? All right. Seeing none, I would suggest we combine questions and comments into one section here. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Schlinsky to kind of keep notes as we go through this, because I know based on our consensus from the special meeting that some of these that are listed in the requested action we probably will not be. We have consensus not to move forward with. I'm going to ask you to keep notes and make a motion when we're ultimately finished, if that's all right with you.
That's fine.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's start at the top here. These are the 3 new ones that we did not discuss at the last hearing. The first one is, to be brief, the display for a period not to exceed 90 days for seasonal items such as garden and patio equipment and supplies. So the request would be to strike that. I have a couple of concerns with that. First is the way that it lives in the zoning ordinance. It is a listed temporary use. So striking that actually would make it not a permitted temporary use. It's kind of a double negative situation by striking it. And so then I guess the question would be, if it is a permitted temporary use, should there be a time limit applied to it? And to be clear, this is not just talking about, say, holiday displays like putting up wreaths or putting out decorations. This is talking about things such as Jewel's floral display in the spring. Really, even it would include things like their fall pumpkin displays. And I know that I think that not the issue with not having a time limit is that you're essentially creating a potential enforcement issue for staff. If people leave things out, you're talking about extending the floor area of a building, say, into a parking lot or onto a sidewalk for long periods of time that was never intended. So I'm curious what other people feel about that, but those are my initial thoughts. Any comments or questions regarding that?
I'm not in favor of, I'm not in favor of striking that.
Okay, so you're comfortable, you like the 90 days?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess I would have a question with staff, Consuelo. That passage, the 90 days, that's a kind of an enforcement number that you're comfortable with, correct?
Correct. That's been the standard here in Villa Park, and that's pretty consistent with other standards for seasonal sales.
And nothing about that would stop, say, Pioneer Garden and Feed from having a fall display, transitioning it to a summer display. It's more to keep someone from setting up something permanently and calling it a temporary display because there's no time limit.
Correct.
Correct? All right. So I guess is there anyone up here who is in favor of striking it or modifying the 90 days?
No, I'm in favor of leaving it as it is.
Okay.
I believe that our village benefits from a 90-day period in all C districts under the permitted use standards.
Correct.
Yeah. And I believe, we have a similar, I can't say that the 90 days is the exact same number of days, but for instance, we have a similar ordinance for the displays of temporary signs in commercial windows, so that it kind of forces commercial users to turn over signs, and if signs and windows become faded and falling down, that faded beer sign is the one I always imagine, but faded and falling down, there's an enforcement mechanism in place by which staff could say, that's been up a lot longer than 90 days. All right, so then I believe we have consensus not to strike that. Okay. The next issue is no entertainment, whether live, recorded, or otherwise, is permitted in the outdoor seating area. This to me is a bit of a political question, more than a zoning question. But I'd be curious to hear anyone's thoughts on it.
I wouldn't like to strike that. I think that should stay in. We have those set up for a reason. And it just feels like a lot of these are we've got a lot of them that are dealing with the storage containers, and then a few others that are just popped in there. We're learning from ourselves what to do here, right?
Yeah. So,
Question for that. If that is stricken from the record, then any outside entertainment that then occurs is just subject to noise ordinances.
our existing nuisance ordinance,
Right.
correct. Currently, you can have outdoor entertainment, but you have to get a permit for it. I believe that's the case, correct, Consuelo?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, yes, that's a special event.
I'm in favor of keeping it that same way where you got to get a permit for it.
Is there any, my opinion on this is that I understand that there may be some venues in the village that would like to have outdoor entertainment on a recurring basis. I don't know that our permit process currently allows that, but I wouldn't be in favor of striking this wholesale. What I would say is what I've said a couple of times, is that I would maybe like to see, and this does not live in the zoning ordinance, but see the village board, perhaps, explore whether or not there's an alternative that could allow that through a permit process that wouldn't be a wholesale opening it up. Because there are some businesses that, for instance, may be too close to single-family residential. This would theoretically allow it in the backyard or of any business. I could also potentially see maybe a special use process if it had to go through zoning, but with it requiring a permit that's probably already outlined in the village code outside of the zoning ordinance.
I would think that that's a special event permit that
Yeah.
we currently have.
Yeah, and does that allow for any type of recurring event?
It's very specific to events and dates.
So
And it goes
yeah.
through the manager's office.
And my thought on this one from the beginning has been that this is really, is there political will to do this? Because we could sit up here all night and craft an ordinance with timeframes and cutoffs and locations where it would be allowed, but if there's no political will to do it, then it's kind of a moot point.
Well, and then if it's after hours that it's gonna take place, who's gonna manage whether it could potentially be a nightmare for the village to try to maintain.
Right. So I think there's no wholesale, there's no consensus up here for a wholesale striking of it.
No, not for me. No.
Any other thoughts or comments on that one?
I don't strike that. I'm not in favor of striking this verbatim as the proposal reads, for several points. One, unfortunately, and there's no one person or one department to blame, I think this goes back generations. The term entertainment is not defined within our portion of the zoning code itself. Similarly, the term entertainment is not defined anywhere in our general municipal code. Definitions matter, or at least I feel that definitions matter. If an entertainment is used in a multitude of different sections of our general municipal code. Accordingly, I would like to call on the Board of Trustees to contemplate defining the term entertainment at large, and the zoning code may be able to incorporate that same definition. Second point is that Section 15 of the General Code is for nuisance and nuisance noises, etc. Section 15-608 is miscellaneous noise sources. Section 15-609 is nuisance noises. I believe in the year of 2021, there was a question or there was discussion of the sections pertaining to nuisances or nuisance noises. And I believe I proposed, possibly informally, to Cheryl Tucker to take back to the board, or the then administration, potential revisions, and it might have been too close to the election for that administration to contemplate such. As I said, I'm not in favor of wholesale striking section 6.11.2 G.7 because I would really like to call on the board to try to align, if that means by amendment, the nuisance sections with entertainment so everything can be consistent, congruent, and easily enforceable across the board.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on that because this is my personal opinion, I think as a village, we are kind of at a place where it might not be the worst thing to have some sort of licensing or special use. For instance, Chicago has the, I think they call it the PPA, I can't remember what it stands for now. It's essentially a small performance venue permit that you can acquire that allows you to do these sort of things without regular permits, because of some of the problems that they had with noise issues and complaints, and they established a process for it. I don't know that we necessarily need to go that far, but something along those lines is what I would like to see, whether it's certain areas or certain users with the permit process. That's my personal opinion. All right, so there's no broad consensus to strike that at this time. But I think our point has been made on that one.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
It would seem that whatever we talk about relative to that particular item, it seems like it needs to align properly and correctly with the other portion of the village code, namely the items that Justin was referring to, Article 6 and 15, 608 and 609, those miscellaneous noise sources and noise nuisances.
Yes, and
It just seems like those, we need to make sure that we're jiving together. Whatever's in our zoning component should align correctly with that.
right, and that's you know,
And I'm not so sure that it currently does when we say you can't have any music, because it seems like if you read that other portion, and granted that's not our purview, but if you read that, it's, you know, there's certain time limits and restrictions that sort of get put into place in terms of those nuisance issues. So whatever we do, I think we need to make sure that that gets aligned with those portions of the village code, but that's all I'm,
right, and
that's my thoughts.
the what I was trying to think of with Chicago is the personal, I had it and I just forgot. It's the something place of amusement ordinance, license. And that allows you to conduct within certain guidelines, like indoor concerts on a regular basis, or theoretically outdoor, depending on what's approved. And whether that's approved by the zoning or through administrative or what, that something along those lines might be in order, because I do think that especially in the Villa Avenue area, we could see some uses where within certain limits that might not be a bad thing, in my opinion.
Chairman, I believe that you're referencing the City of Chicago's public place of amusement license. And
Yes,
also
public place, that's
and
the word
also
I was
the
looking for.
performing arts venue license.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. I was wanting to say personal place, but I knew that wasn't right. All right, so the next item would be on the outdoor seating, whether or not an occupancy permit is required for opening seating areas, and whether or not seating must be removed between basically the months of December, January, and February. We had talked about this one a couple years ago, or actually it was probably early last year, or maybe the end of 2019. As I recall, I think most people actually did not have an issue with outdoor seating that is on private property remaining in place year-round. That's my recollection. I think that this, if we're going to do something with this, one thing could be to separate this into a public seating in public rights of way versus seating in private property. So the first item here is occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of outdoor seating areas. I would assume everybody, whether it's for annually or for permanent, is there anybody up here who would be in favor of striking the need to have a permit to establish an outdoor seating area?
No.
Okay. So I think that part is valid, needing to have a permit to establish an outdoor seating area. So the second question is whether or not there should be a time limit for that, and whether or not that time limit should apply to all outdoor seating, or could there be a delineated difference between outdoor seating in public rights of way and in private property? Obviously, the intent of this is not to force owners to not have outdoor seating when the weather's nice. It's intended to allow for snow removal and such, which would be problematic if seating was allowed in the public way in the winter.
Could also be for the safety of the employees.
That's true. That's true. So I'm interested in hearing anyone's thoughts or comments on this one besides my own.
I would be in favor of, if it's on public right-of-way, that we keep it the way it is. If it's on private property, it doesn't, I wouldn't think it would matter whether it stayed or whether it was moved. But anything that's on public right-of-way, I would assume in the winter months would need to be removed.
And in that regard, I would also agree that if you're using the public right-of-way for outdoor seating, then annual permitting would be the least that you could do as a business owner. And it allows the village to re-inspect that and make sure any fences or tables you may put out are in the right place.
Correct.
Quick question. Can we give an example of somebody that's putting seating out in the public right away?
Currently, I can't think of one.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm
I mean, other than maybe some things post, during COVID, I can't think of one. But I could think of a user who may have and could potentially standard metery. They have their large windows that open to the sidewalk. They have a large sidewalk. I've even seen them use the parking lot and in some parts of the public right-of-way for things like bag tournaments. So I don't necessarily, they've got a fairly small interior space. I don't think it would be a stretch to say if they haven't, they're a user who might wish to do that. They might also find a way to do it in their parking lot without losing required parking spaces as well. But that's one. I mean, I don't know if
it
more
seems limited in my mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that more would potentially explore or another user that might open along there, but I'm thinking in that one, I'm mostly thinking Villa Avenue and potentially users in the old town part of Ardmore.
Sure.
Mind if I ask a question to staff?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so Consuelo, in your thorough memo, it's indicated that none of the communities listed below, such as Addison Lombard, Elmhurst, Glenview, etc., allow for outdoor entertainment unless approved at a special event when that's an option, so that goes to G7. Now that we're talking of G12, were you able to ascertain any applicable standards for for other villages or other neighboring communities as to how G12 applies to Villa Park?
So generally, a permit is required, even if it's on private property. Definitely if it's on public property, such as an example of Sandra Meadery, that's public property, the public sidewalk. On private property, typically a permit is required, like I mentioned, and there's some restrictions in terms of making sure that minimum clearances of 5 feet for sidewalk clearance are provided, and that applies to private property. That the equipment that is being stored is going to be securely, safely installed so that it doesn't pose a danger to the public in case of high winds, for example, or vice versa. So those are just some examples that I found in my research, that it's not uncommon to have permit requirements and location and clearance requirements, whether it's public or private.
Specifically speaking to the potential seasonal prohibition of the winter months, anything from neighboring communities on that regard, or in that regard, excuse me?
If they did allow it, it was consistent with this time frame. Some were just silent on it. It's on a case-by-case basis, I would say.
Thank you.
Kind of a follow-up question on that. Were you finding that other communities required an annual permit for outdoor seating on private property?
They could. It was a range of whether, if they did allow it, they required an annual permit. Others, they did not require an annual permit as long as it was on private property.
Yeah.
So it does vary, and it's very specific to the community and what the needs are and what the wishes are for what they want to see in their community.
All right. So I guess this is kind of the one we should try to solve, and then we can move on to the other ones. Would people be in favor of splitting it into a public versus private, at least in terms of the dates? Is there consensus to that?
Yeah.
And is there anyone up here who thinks that private property should not be allowed to keep outdoor seating areas up year-round?
Repeat that again?
Is there anyone that thinks that private property, outdoor seating in private property should not be allowed year-round? I mean,
I'm not aligned with that. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not either. And that proposes a storage issue for private property owners.
yeah. So everyone's in favor of allowing that to happen, to remain up
yeah,
year-round?
no
Okay.
time limit per se.
And I think that time frame is fine for anything in the public way.
Well, what precisely is outdoor furniture?
Outdoor seating for a restaurant primarily?
So we're just talking about seating then?
Yes. I mean, yeah. There's a whole series of ordinances of standards, some of which are on page 4 of the staff report, that define what outdoor seating is and where it can be allowed, and how close to the building, and how much space, and whether or not it needs to be fenced, and so on. And that's really what this is referencing. It's generally going to be outdoor seating, though. And so then I guess if we're in favor of splitting those into a public and a private property versus public right-of-way, then the other question to resolve is whether or not seating on private property should be required to be re-permitted annually, or whether once is enough.
I'm in favor of annually.
We just get a quick tally on that. What do you think?
I'm annual.
Your annual?
For private property,
Yeah.
I think a one-time is enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see one time. I mean, if it's tied to a business, sort of operation, and that's what they're doing.
Right. In theory, if they're moving it or expanding or whatever, that would require a permit.
Right.
How about from this end, what you've already said you're in favor of annually, Mike? What do you think, Larry?
Annually.
Annually? Okay. Justin? Yeah, Justin, what do you think? Annually or one time?
I'm split. Perhaps my direction can be clarified by a question of staff. If it was to be in a one-time perpetual permit as opposed to annual, I imagine there would still be some upkeep and presentation standards that go with that to make sure that it's in compliance with the other existing codes, that just because a permit is granted does not mean you can leave the outdoor seating area in shambles, correct?
Yeah, it would be subject to the guidelines that we presently have in the code in terms of the equipment and the seating, taking down if they're not being used, or protecting clearing the walkways in the areas to make sure there's accessibility to the area, so that wouldn't change.
It's a toss-up for me.
Okay. How about you, Ken?
Once is good with me.
Once?
As long as they, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. As long as they take care of it, upkeep, and it's not a danger to anybody falling apart.
Yeah, so it looks like we're kind of split on that with, I'm personally in favor of once, which gives once a little bit of a head start. So when we come to that one, we can either vote on it separately, or we could just vote on the whole thing at once, depending on how folks feel. So,
And that's just for on your own private property.
correct.
Splitting it out being, if there's a public component, that
would be an
that's a
annual permit.
per incident
Yes.
request.
Yeah. So Justin, do you want to try to craft something for that, or I hear you typing?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm contemplating if the most efficient manner to go about this endeavor is to split G12 into G12 sub A and G12 sub B, and make A or B private or public, and then B the inverse.
yeah, I would do that, and then to get it close and leave it up to the codifiers to get it 100%.
Because that would leave 13 intact then.
Yeah, I don't want to have to renumber
Right.
other parts of the code. I don't think that's efficient. So if I may, it could be as simple, or if anybody wishes to make a motion, it could be as simple as to revise current 6.11.2 G12 to read 6.11.2 G12A. An occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area for public areas. The occupancy permit is valid from March 1 through November 30. and must be renewed annually. All outdoor furniture must be removed within 24 hours of permit expiration. Then 12B, an occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area when on privately owned property.
That works for me.
That works for me.
That works for me.
Okay.
Point of clarification and procedure for staff. Do we technically need to strike existing language, or would a motion be satisfactory if it just reads to replace the current language?
I would assume the motion to replace the current language with what's being proposed.
Okay. And because I think we're split on that, when it comes time for a motion, I'm actually going to ask for a separate motion on that one, because I think we're going to have broad consensus on the rest. If that's okay.
Would that then require us to split PZ-21-0013 into like a sub A, sub B type ordeal as well?
I don't believe so. I think we could vote on all of these individually if we wanted.
Okay.
Because we're just passing a recommendation on to the board. Technically, we could vote on all of them individually, but I think we're going to have broad consensus, if not unanimity, on most of the rest, based on the previous meeting. All right, so moving on to the next one, there may be no more than one temporary outdoor storage container per property. This is temporary outdoor storage containers. The previous meeting, we had, I think, unanimity on that. Is there anyone here that? All right, so then we will not strike that one. The next one is time limit on temporary outdoor storage containers, 60 days versus 90 days. I think we had a slight majority in favor of 90 days. Is there anyone that has strong opinions about changing that from 60 days to 90 days?
In favor of changing that?
Is there anyone that would be opposed to that change?
No.
I think the 90 days aligns with seasonality for some users, like Walmart during the Christmas season or others. All right, so that will be part of the motion to strike the 60 days and replace with the 90 days. Then we have the revision to dimensions. The reason for that revision with those specific numbers are the numbers in the replacement have been modified to meet a standard 20-foot shipping container. I assume there's no opposition to that one?
Nope.
All right, so that will be part of the motion. The next is temporary outdoor storage containers must be placed only on a driveway or other hard surface. We had unanimity on that one, on last one. Is there anyone that would be opposed to? So the unanimity was to not strike that.
That's correct.
Yes, do not strike that.
Is there anyone that wishes to strike that?
This is A7?
Yes.
Or- No, I believe it should remain.
Okay. So that will not be part of the motion. The next one is outdoor storage containers may not be used. This is the definition of conducting business or selling merchandise. We had unanimity, I believe, at the time on not replacing that. That didn't really get us anywhere. Anyone in favor of striking that and replacing? All right, that will not be part of the motion. And then next is placing placing permanent outdoor storage containers on a paved surface. I know we had a bit of a back and forth on whether or not there was a way to to grandfather in existing containers that may not be on paved surfaces. I know Commissioner Case, who is not here tonight, was one who was in favor of potentially grandfathering that. I know staff has said in their report that they would not be in favor of striking that, and they would not be in favor of grandfathering it because of potential enforcement issues, not knowing when a shipping container arrived on the site. Something else, one that may be reported down the road. How long has it been there? Did it just get there? So I am personally not in favor of striking that. Is anyone in favor of striking that, or have any additional input on that?
I think we leave it.
Yeah, that's, to clarify, that's for temporary, not permanent. That's my fault. All right, if no one's opposed to leaving that as is, then that will not be part of the motion. 10, I think staff did a pretty good job of describing that one. The or similar methods is intended to allow staff broad latitude in terms of determining what is screened and what is not. Whether it's a fence, whether it's painting, whether it's a trellis. The issue with adding or painted is that all shipping containers are painted. So, unless anyone is opposed to not striking that, that will not be part of the motion. May not be used for the purpose of conducting business or selling merchandise. This is the same as the one above, but for permanent shipping containers, based on the consensus last time, unless someone feels otherwise at this time, that will not be part of the motion. And the final one is the definition of shipping containers. To clarify, we did review the definition of shipping container on the codified version of the ordinance, and the grammatical issue with the colon was fixed to be in line with other things. Unless anyone thinks there's a reason to change that one will not be part of the motion. All right, so I think that's all of those. Let me flip the page here and make sure. So to clarify, we will be replacing text for 6.11.2 G12 to include a separation between private and public rights of way. We will be changing the length of time that a temporary outdoor storage container can remain on site from 60 days to 90 days. And we will be amending 6.12A6 to include standard shipping container dimensions, as opposed to the more general dimension that was previously part of the ordinance. Is there anything else we're missing? Anybody have any comments or questions for staff? All right, if there are no more questions or comments, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
All right. Per your advice or your direction, I think 2 motions would be the most proper here.
Yes.
Okay. So first motion to make with regards to this particular item will be motion to approve PZ-21-21-0013, seeking amending certain provisions of Appendix C, Basic Zoning Ordinance of the Villa Park Municipal Code as detailed below. Replace 6.2.8.5 with the following. No temporary outdoor storage container may remain on the subject property for more than 90 consecutive days per year. And replace 6.12.8.6 with the following. Temporary outdoor storage containers may not exceed 8 1/2 feet in height, 8 feet wide, by 20 feet in length, or cover an area of more than 160 square feet in area. In recommending the amendments above, the Zoning and Planning Commission has determined that this amendment is in the public interest and a benefit to the welfare of the entire community.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
A second from Commissioner Orlowski. Roll call vote. Calvert,
Yes.
Hofstra,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Ledke,
Yes.
Orlowski,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Shalinski.
Yes.
I too vote yes, and our recommendation will pass to the village board. And then I would entertain a motion on the remaining item.
Yes, just 1 second, please. Okay. Next motion is to approve PZ-21-0013, seeking amending certain provisions of Appendix C, Basic Zoning Ordinance of the Villa Park Municipal Code as detailed below. Replace 6.11.2 G.12 with the following bifurcation. A. An occupancy permit is permitted prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area for public areas. The occupancy permit is valid from March 1st through November 30th and must be renewed annually. All outdoor furniture must be removed within 24 hours of permit expiration. G12B. An occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area when on privately owned property. In recommending the amendments above, the Planning and Zoning Commission has determined that this amendment is in the public interest and a benefit to the welfare of the entire community.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner Orlowski. Questions or comments on the motion?
Does the record, it sounded like he said in under 12A that it said an occupancy permit is permitted. I want to make sure the record, what that said. I thought he substituted permitted for required. I just want to make sure what word.
Yeah, you didn't use the word required.
I think he said it's valid from March. Could you read back
Yeah, let me.
the motion real quick? Or okay. Yeah, it should be G12B, starting with the line, the occupancy permit. Or wait, no, it's G12,
It should be G12A.
G12A, the occupancy,
Yeah.
yeah, the occupancy permit is,
It's permitted prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area.
I apologize. Let me rephrase. All right, strike the prior language. To a motion to approve PZ-21-0013, seeking amending certain provisions of Appendix C, Basic Zoning Ordinance of the Villa Park Municipal Code as detailed below. Replace 6.11.2 G.12 with the following bifurcation. A. An occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area for public areas. The occupancy permit is valid from March 1st through November 30th and must be renewed annually. All outdoor furniture must be removed within 24 hours of permit expiration. G12B. An occupancy permit is required prior to the opening of the outdoor seating area when on privately owned property. In recommending the amendments above, the Zoning and Planning Commission has determined that this amendment is in the public interest and a benefit to the welfare of the entire community.
all right, we have amended motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second again from Commissioner Orlowski. Any questions or comments on that motion as amended? Roll call vote. Calvert,
No.
Hofstra,
No.
Jackson,
No.
Ledke?
We're voting on this split?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Orlowski,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Shalinski.
Yes.
I too vote yes. With that, our recommendation passes to the village board, who can accept, reject, or modify. And that will end that public hearing and all of our formal business. For anyone who's stuck with us through all the zoning geekery, is there anyone wishing to make public comments on non-agenda items?
I would like to make some comments on non-agenda items.
Yes, please.
I have 2 items. I will be passing 2 separate exhibits for the 2 items that I plan to discuss with you tonight.
Thanks.
The first exhibit I passed out is a plat of survey, is a copy of a plat of survey for a residential property in the village. This property is unique in the sense that it has 2 primary structures on the property. One is a 2-story residence towards the front, and it does have a 2-story building residence in the back as well. One detached garage. I would like to take a straw poll on a petition. Should there be a petition to allow a driveway as shown on the drawing and marked with an X on the drawing. Let the record show that this property did apply for a permit, a building permit for a driveway expansion. Only that area that is not X'd was approved. And there's some existing areas of the areas that were not approved that were paved. And the homeowner would like to hear from the Planning and Zoning Commission if that's something that would be supported given the unique circumstances of the subject property, should he pursue a variation. So I would like to open it up for discussion and any questions that you have regarding this request, should it go forward with a variation.
Okay, so I'm not completely clear on what's being asked. So the garage, the frame garage immediately behind the house is existing. Is this a driveway repaving or a new driveway?
It's a new driveway. Yeah, so the area historically was a gravel, parts of the driveway were gravel and parts were asphalt, as noted on the survey. The homeowner would like to pave all those areas to meet current standards, but that would require variation just because our current code limits, does require driveways to lead to off-street parking spaces inside a garage, essentially. As shown here, the paved area in the side and the rear of the garage would not be leading to a off-street parking space in a garage.
So the variation is for the paving surrounding the garage?
Correct. For the driveway, for those areas of the driveway that would not be leading to an off-street parking space in a garage.
Okay.
So it essentially functions as a wraparound driveway of the entirety of a framed garage, but obviously the garage is not accessible from all 4 directions. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. It's a unique situation, so that's the reason why it's before you here tonight.
So other than the existing building at the rear of the property, what would make this unique or a hardship that would permit them to, have they expressed what their hardship might be?
They have not, other than that it's been used historically like that in terms of a non-conforming situation where you have 2 primary structures and the driveway wrapping around the existing frame garage, and the gravel has been in place. From a staff perspective, it would be required to be brought up to code standards as it relates to pavement for driveways. So we are now supportive of a driveway or surface to be used for parking of vehicles. But we do find that this property is somewhat unique. There aren't many, if more than this example of properties with 2 residential structures on the property. And this is a pretty big lot. So, as long as it meets the standards for a driveway, I don't really see an issue with allowing this under the unique circumstances that the property consists of.
And just to clarify, has there been any work done as far as the paving so far?
So they did apply for a permit. They got approval to pave only that area shown on the survey that's marked as asphalt driveway. They did go ahead and start working on those other areas shown with an X on the survey. But we did get in contact with them saying you were not following the approved plan and talked to them about the variation process.
Okay.
Is this 2-story frame building to the
West?
Is that a house?
Yes, these are residential structures. It's a house.
That residential structure, what off-street parking do they have, or what do they use?
So they have the driveway and the garage.
They use the same driveway and garage?
Correct. The 2 structures use the same driveway.
So this has 2 residential structures on it?
Correct.
The small one in the back corner is also a residential structure?
Correct.
Where are they currently parking?
The gravel surface.
The gravel surface?
Yes. And next to the garage.
And this is all one parcel?
Correct.
Yeah, this is
So
one
the
of those.
homeowner owns both of these properties then?
It's
That
one
is covered
property,
whole
both of
property.
these structures are under the
So
same
that
ownership.
They own both structures?
Correct.
Yeah, so this is one of those lots that we have some of in the village where they're somewhere between like 300 and 450 feet deep. We have a few of those around. Lombard does too.
295 feet.
Hmm?
295
Yeah,
feet.
and I think they were in areas that were platted and then some through streets were never put through. They became deep lots. There's some on the north side, there's some on the west. Okay, so essentially what they're doing is they're creating a parking pad at the rear of the building to allow someone, whether it's whoever lives in the back unit or in the house, to pull around, park behind the garage, and then pull back around, essentially creating a circular driveway around the garage, as I imagine how it's designed to function.
It's quite unique.
Is there a street on this side, by the second building?
So this is an interior lot. The street is Summit Avenue, and it's along the west lot line.
Over here, is this a street?
Oh,
What is
on
this?
the east line? On
Yeah.
the east line, yeah.
That's another property
The
line.
east line is another property. There is no
It's
street
not
on
a
the east
street,
side.
it's just a property line.
Backyard.
So it's
I'm
probably
pulling up an aerial.
probably a converted coach house.
So this is an aerial of the property.
Yes, it is.
This is the coach house on the east end of the property. This is a garage. This is the primary structure of the 2, the biggest main structure that is closest to Summit Avenue.
Yeah. And then the property to the east is technically a Euclid address.
Correct.
Yes.
So there's no street.
That's right. So this is an interior lot.
Yeah.
That
Consuela,
faces Summit.
Is there renters in the back lot or in that back residence or? what's
My
it used
understanding
for?
is the property owner's parents stay there occasionally. That's an excellent question. I've heard that it sometimes is used as a rental. I've heard that's primarily used by the parents to stay there, so, but there is someone there. Whether it's permanent basis or a temporary basis, that I can't confirm. And you can kind of see the area in question here.
Well, the
North of-
picture, that makes it clear.
Yeah, north of the garage, east of the garage, and the need for wrapping that
Right.
around for ease of getting in and out of that back area.
Yeah, the lot, given the size of the lot coverage area issue doesn't particularly concern me. We don't have their application in front of us, but I guess real quickly going right to left, and you don't have to give your opinion if you don't want to. We'll start with Commissioner Lutke. Would you theoretically be in favor of this? Based on what little you have in front of you?
I would not be opposed. How's that? Is
That works. How about,
No, I think that's a big driveway, there's plenty of parking, I don't think it's a special circumstance. I mean, yeah, it's a second house, I understand that's unique, but there's no parking shortage, so it makes sense to take that.
so you would be opposed to it?
Correct.
Okay.
I would have to understand what he intends to do with that stuff that's wrapped all the way around the garage.
Okay.
Okay, I'm glad to see there's a fence down the north side of the lot. I sure wouldn't want to be his neighbor from what I'm seeing, looking at there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you let him pave it, if that just makes this worse.
I would say that we could definitely monitor that and as a property follow-up, property maintenance follow-up if there's a need for it. My understanding is that areas, that those items are no longer there.
So how about you, Commissioner Orlowski?
I'd be curious to possibly hear from any of the neighbors on what takes place there.
Ken?
If they clean it up, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but along the same lines, you know, what kind of neighbors are they? And what could we expect if they're currently doing it now with gravel? You know, they're going to continue. I think it would clean it up a lot if they could pave it, so.
No.
Okay. And Justin?
I can understand the uniqueness of this property, as it is a very elongated property from the east end to the west end. So I can understand the uniqueness of the potential variation application. I would like to hear from the petitioner formally as to why this presents a hardship. So I would encourage the applicant to move forward with the formal process.
Yeah, so I'm also curious on the hardship because this is a large lot with a lot of options, and the question I would have is this the best way to resolve the option and resolve the issue? Because as it stands right now, I mean, there's quite a lot of room to park cars there. I'm not strongly opposed to it, but I can't say definitively that I would be in favor of it. So, you have that for what that's worth. All right, any other discussion on that before we move on to the next handout? All right.
The next item before you for discussion, or at least more of a FYI to bring you up to date, I wanted to update the commission on the efforts that the village has taken since we heard from one particular business and the public in terms of complaints and concerns regarding the parking spaces or lack of parking spaces in the public right-of-way along Stone and those abutting area. I'll pull up an aerial to go along with the handout that I passed out that shows a subject area. We're talking about that area just east of Madison, along the train tracks, bounded by Stone, Michigan, and Ridge. So I'll go ahead and zoom out on the aerial and zoom into that area in question here. Okay, so we're talking about this area here. The exhibit that I handed out highlights those areas considered public right-of-way. Those are public right-of-way areas. They're hatched in red to show that as it currently stands, there is non-conforming use of that public area with vehicles. The code does not allow overnight parking on public right-of-way areas unless it's been allowed under a specific circumstance by the Public Works Department. But in this particular area, there's been complaints from neighbors and property owners, businesses in particular, that have concerns with their lack of parking for customers, for the public to visit their businesses. So this came up at one of our Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, the need for what are we doing about this issue? So since then, I've been in correspondence with the police department and the director of Public Works, Michael Guerra, and the police chief, brief us regarding what can we do from an enforcement standpoint. From a community development standpoint, I do want to bring the commission up to date in terms of what our efforts have been. We've inspected the properties and followed up with notices of violations for any business in there that has not received or applied for a certificate of occupancies. We've done that pretty actively dating back to last year. Going back to June of 2021, March of 2021, October. So we've had ongoing inspections and making sure that the businesses that are operating do have a certificate of occupancy to operate. Many are pending, are in process for that, and those that have not are few and have been issued tickets for that. From a community development standpoint, that we've been focusing on that. The police department has been very active in terms of issuing citations and tickets for those vehicles that violate the parking enforcement in the area. For example, in the period of October 1st to December 31st of 2021, for a total of 92 days, there were a total of 107 citations written in the corridor. And that applies to all the streets in the area, including Stone, Ridge, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. The biggest number of citations were issued for Ridge vehicles parked on Ridge. The violations varied. Those citations varied in terms of violating the parking from prohibition between 2 and 6 a.m. and violating the parking of vehicles that were unregistered, parking within 20 feet of crosswalk, which is not allowed, parking across driveways, which are not allowed. There were citations for that. There was also citations issued for parking within 30 feet of stop signs, parking with the left wheels to curb, and miscellaneous citations. So just, that's a brief summary of the types of violations that and citations that were issued from the period of October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. Recently, a business owner on Michigan did meet with myself directly to go over his concerns and the lack of keeping the right-of-way areas open that were prohibiting customers from visiting the business, prohibiting delivery trucks from visiting the business. So he was very upset and wanted us to follow up, and with due reason. It was the first time I met him, and the first time I tell him that from my perspective, we're doing what we can within our guidelines to allow his property to have access to it, to allow his customers and deliveries to take place. So the Traffic and Safety Commission will be reviewing this in February in terms of what possible changes, if any, need to be made to this public areas, parking enforcement in those public areas and those public roads. So they will be discussed at the February Traffic and Safety Commission. Unfortunately, the one in January was canceled. Let's see. Yeah, so there's been ongoing discussions between all three departments to make sure that these items are addressed. I understand that they predate this year, and we have every intention to follow up and make sure that we take the necessary measures to address this. I also want to point out that the police have placed temporary no parking signs on barricades in the area, again, to be business friendly and allow for delivery trucks to take place for those businesses. So that's just a brief summary. I wanted to give you an update. I know this item did come up when you were discussing the special use request for the special event on Addison. So those are the two items that I wanted to bring you up to speed on. That is all I have.
Okay, I appreciate the follow-up on that, and I believe it was mentioned at the last village board meeting that the signs reserving parking that were on the face of the building that the applicant was with us before us last time, those have now been removed.
Yes, I'm glad you're bringing that up because I did intend to bring you up to speed on that. On various site inspections that I personally performed along Addison, there were 2 freestanding poles that had signage restricting the use of those parking spaces to businesses, which was not allowed because those are public spaces along Addison. In addition to that, I did find signage on the building itself restricting those adjacent parking spaces. So those have been removed, the signage. If there are any poles that remain, those are also going to be removed. Obviously, with the weather, it has posed some concerns and whether we could do it ourselves. But I believe Public Works is going to be following up by removing those poles, illegal poles on our right-of-way.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. I know I drove by there several times in the weeks leading up to that public hearing, both of them, and there was essentially no parking on the east side of Addison through there. And I was through that area, I don't know, 6:30 on a Friday night a week or two ago, and there might have been 4 cars parked out front. So it really does change the feel of that area because of the number of cars and the shape that some of the cars that are parked along there were in. It was really easy to forget that there were actually businesses behind there because it sort of felt like a scrapyard at times. And I think some of the auto body shops and other shops up there were utilizing some of that public parking for that purpose. So that it definitely, if I was running, say, the tattoo parlor or one of the hair salons along there, and all the spaces in front of my building were taken up by a local garage or a local auto salvage place around the corner, I wouldn't be thrilled with that. So I'm glad to hear that, and I hope it only benefits those businesses that, especially along Addison and the neighbors to the south of Ridge. Right, anyone from the public wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Any comments from the board? All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved. So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.